Hello, welcome back. My name is Bill Donath. I'm president of Logan County Genealogical and Historical Society. In the last video, I promised you a letter from a member of the 38th Regiment, Company F, and that letter is a little lengthy, but well worth the trip. The letter appeared in the October 31st, 1861 issue of the Lincoln Herald, and it was titled From Pilot Knob. Now, we've been to Pilot Knob before with the 7th, a little earlier in the year, but things are getting more active in that area, and we have the 38th there now. So it's a letter from a Logan County volunteer, Our Boys in a Fight. Pilot Knob, Missouri, 28th of October, 1861. Editor Herald. Knowing the general incorrectness of newspaper statements in regard to battles and their results, and having heard that the Battle of Fredericktown, in particular, has been detracted from and misrepresented by correspondents of newspapers, I have determined to give you as faithful a description as an eyewitness and participant can. First, let me assure you that to my knowledge there was not a newspaper correspondent on the grounds until 2 or 3 days after the battle, at which time the correspondent and the special artist of Harper's Weekly made his appearance, and accompanied by some others proceeded to the field of battle to take some sketches and items. This was all the regular correspondent I saw in the place. Therefore, you will understand that what accounts have appeared in the papers have been made up of guesswork and rumor. Our regiment, the 38th Illinois under Colonel W.P. Carlin, the 33rd Illinois with Colonel Hovey, the 21st Illinois, Colonel Alexander, a battery of 4 brass field pieces, 6-pounders under Major Schofield, and a battery of 3 24 howitzers under Lieutenant Purcell, also the 8th Wisconsin under Colonel Murphy, with the 1st Indiana Cavalry Company comprised the force which left here last Sunday evening, October 20th, under command of Colonel Carlin, and arrived at Fredericktown Monday morning at 9 o'clock. When we started from Pilot Knob, we expected to find the enemy entrenched on this side of Fredericktown at Black River, with his battery planted to command the bridge. And so, proceeding with the due caution, we approached the town. Our engineers discovered that the enemy had evacuated his works and fallen back. On this discovery, we marched straight into town with colors flying, and we found on inquiry that the enemy had taken his departure on the previous afternoon at 2 o'clock. This was a very great disappointment to our men, who had marched 25 miles in the hope of meeting an enemy who would stand them a charge. For we had once or twice before been out to meet the enemy and found none. This time we had made sure we should find something worthy of our steel, but alas, disappointment again appeared to be our portion. After venting their disappointed feelings in angry vociferations, the men, using their knapsacks for pillows, stretched themselves along the grassy sides of the road and spent about 3 hours in a refreshing sleep. For myself, having had good opportunity of a berth and bed in one of the large army wagons, I did not lose much sleep during the march, and we spent the time in which the men were sleeping in looking about the town. I never saw so many women of all sizes, ages, and kinds in one little town who professed to be widows, as here. The property and the persons of widows have generally been respected by the United States soldiers, and they appear to have learned the fact here. Consequently, the significant phrase "widow woman's property" was prominently chalked on many doors about the town. From this it appears that the people believed, as they had been taught by the leaders of secession and rebellion, that our soldiers were a set of villains and savages, destroying and ruining all before them. They all here, even the women and the children, with very few, if any exceptions, are rank secessionists, having been taught that they are defending their rights, their liberty, their property, and their lives. They do not regard themselves as in rebellion to one of the best of governments. This all springs from the idea that the sole object of the war is the abolition of slavery, and this having been intimated by some of the rabid abolitionists of the extreme north, is laid hold of and used with telling effect by the rebel leaders among the uneducated and ignorant people of the Southwest. There are thousands or upon thousands in this country who never read, and in fact cannot read, and consequently know nothing but what is told them by the wicked, conscience-seared leaders. Many, a poor fellow on a battlefield with whom I've conversed, told me that his captain or colonel, and sometimes General Jeff Thompson himself, has told them that the United States troops is to free the slaves and put guns and knives in their hands to murder their masters and their families. This they are made to honestly believe, and their only alternative is to take up arms. Many of them say very unwillingly against us. Indeed, I pity the poor fellows from the bottom of my heart when I see their sufferings brought on by wretchedly wicked and designing men. I tell you in all earnestness that no leader who falls into the hands of our men will receive quarter. Death most speedily and without mercy will be their portion. But to return to the narrative, I found the town of Fredericktown a pleasantly situated and quite pretty place of about 500 inhabitants. It is a healthy and, if it were not for secession, would not be an unpleasant section of the country in which to live. Quite a large portion of the ground here is tillable, and what is not is rich in mineral wealth. No one in town appeared to know anything in reference to the whereabouts of Jeff Thompson and his forces. All professed innocence and ignorance. By the way, there were very few men in the town at all. The word was that Thompson had moved south with his forces on the afternoon before, on the road to Greenville. This was the most information that it was possible to get. At about 12 o'clock, there was a force of about 2,000 troops consisting of the 17th and 10th Illinois regiments and a battery of field artillery under Colonel Plummer came in from Cape Girardeau, and in conjunction with our forces, after a rest and consultation, started out at about 2 o'clock on the road towards Greenville. But they had not proceeded more than a mile when the engineers who were in advance spied what they thought was a masked battery, which commanded the road from some distance. The attention of the commanding officer was called to it, who ordered a halt. After the necessary preparations, our artillery was brought to bear upon the hidden battery of the enemy and commenced firing upon them, which immediately brought a reply, after which a brisk cannonading ensued, damaging the enemy considerably and finally silencing his artillery altogether. In the meantime, line of battle was formed, skirmishers were thrown on either flank, and we commenced closing in upon them. Not for some time could be heard but the continuous roar of musketry and the cracking of the rifles. 3 companies of our regiment, by some means, got in advance of us, and the command came for us to join them. But before we came up with them, we heard their cheers rolling up with a swelling sound. They had picked off the enemy's artillerists and captured one of their guns. We were up in the time to help them drag it out to the road. The enemy being now in full retreat, we were ordered at double quick to give chase. We had no sooner got well underway and were again in sight of the enemy when we were ordered to give way to the Indiana cavalry under Major Gavitt to charge. So we made way and cheered them on, but it was a fatal move to Major Gavitt, for he had not proceeded far in advance of us when the enemy from an ambuscade poured a volley upon them and brought down the gallant major and 4 other brave men, among whom was the brave Captain Hinman. We then proceeded in pursuit at double quick, and that too what would be considered quite a mountain in your country, and indeed it is not to be despised even in this. Climbing up the hill, such a hurry made the men begin to show their first signs of fatigue. In fact, I do not think any of us could have endured it on an ordinary occasion. But here was no time for lagging. And by cheering words we got the men up in order. But again were companies A, B, and C in advance, having had less difficult ground to get over and had pleasure of settling with those ambuscaders who had charged into the cavalry. Their last accounts. Many of them were left there upon the field. On we swept, but after this could only get scattering shots at the rebels, till finally by the appearance of a white flag from the rebels the chase was relinquished. The flag, however, only proved to be a party who professed to be surgeons coming to take care of the wounded. And as we afterwards learned, it was a ruse to stop pursuit so that Jeff Thompson and his balance of his forces might get out of the way. It was now about sundown, and we turned our steps towards town, which we reached sometime after dark. Many of the soldiers made long and loud threats that the town should be burned for deceiving us in the morning in regard to the pursuit of the enemy. And it was only by the most arduous efforts of the officers that the men were restrained from the work of destruction that night. Finally, however, quiet was in part restored, and the quarters were found in deserted houses. For when we got back, many of the houses which were occupied when we started, we found tenantless. This looked as though they were conscience-stricken and made the soldiers breathe still heavier threatenings. For our tired men, after we had secured a room for our company to quarter in, I took Johnny Elton and found a room with a good bed in the hotel at headquarters, where we rested most beautifully. We were awakened at an early hour in the morning by the lurid flames of a burning building, which showed that some of the soldiers had succeeded in their threats. There was, in the course of the morning, some 4 or 5 houses burnt and some little plundering done. But fortunately, not so much as I had feared would be done. Colonel Carlin, who had command of the post, had forbidden it, and his regiment behaved very orderly. An expedition was started out on the morning of Tuesday in pursuit of Thompson, but it returned 2 days after with report that the forces were completely dispersed. The enemy, numbering between 6,000 and 7,000, was commanded by Brigadier General Jeff Thompson, and Colonel Lowe was killed in the first charge. The enemy's loss is estimated between 300 and 400 killed and 200 wounded and prisoners. Our loss, or the federal loss, was 6 killed, 25 wounded, 3 of which have since died. Respectfully, C.A. Miller. So there we have the letter and the account of the fighting that was engaged in at Fredericktown, Missouri. We do have a couple of small entries here on that, in that same paper, same issue. Colonel Ward H. Lehman was in town Monday last. And that's Lincoln that they're talking about there. And we have a few good men are wanted for Captain Holden's company. Apply to J.C. Webster, Circuit Clerk, who will furnish passes. So we have Captain Holden of the 7th Infantry, Company H, if I remember right, out of Lincoln. And he's looking for more men to fill out his company. So that's it for today. We're coming up to another report from 7th Infantry. So we'll pick that up at the next video. See you then.